I want to just start. Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see all of you. This session is going to be the last of the first part of our what will be a year-long session. So we're not meeting next week. So thank you for being a part of this. And what a terrible last few days of so much loss and heartache. And I am really grateful for the chance to sit and just study together and lift up the words of our tradition and be with all of you. So thank you. And we do this really in the holding in our hearts the students from Brown University, the two students who were murdered, and the many students who are on lockdown and terrorized for many hours. Obviously, the Jewish community in Australia that has been warning for years that things are really serious and they need to be taken seriously. And even with the incredible acts of heroism, this is just a horror beyond words. And so hope that they continue to find strength and consolation, not only with one another, but also knowing that there's a worldwide community standing with them. And also here in LA, just the endless string of tragedies of the last couple of days. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to sit together and to learn together, even amidst all of this, and to affirm that there is something eternal and ever present that continues to bind us and lift us up. So we're going to go into the text again now. And I want to just remind everyone, and I realize, okay. So I realize that this text is the text that we're learning today is a continuation of what we started last week. And so I will bring us back into the context of that. We are, remember, in a lengthy session, the lengthiest portion of the Talmud that deals with the destruction of Jerusalem and all of the loss that came from it. And throughout the Talmud, as we talked about last week, there are numerous answers that are given to explain why our people went through such suffering and such devastation. And then this set of stories is particularly illuminating for us. So what we're going to do is take a look just at text number 1, which is a reminder from where we were last week. This whole section began with Rabbi Yochanan saying, "What is the meaning of that which is written? Happy is the man who fears always, but he who hardens his heart shall fall into mischief." Remember that strange verse from Proverbs. And Rabbi Yochanan goes on to say that Jerusalem was destroyed on account of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. And this mistake that happened when the host asked his servant to go out and invite Kamsa to come to the feast that he was having at his house. And in what seems like an honest and genuine error, the servant brings Bar Kamsa instead, and once he arrived, was humiliated by the host. The host is not blamed for destroying Jerusalem. The rabbis are blamed for destroying Jerusalem because they were present at that party and they witnessed the humiliation and they did not do anything about it. We read the lengthy text about how one small insult can snowball into a kind of humiliation worthy of destroying an entire people. And that's what happened here, according to our text. Again, it's an interesting choice that our rabbis have made over the many years. It could seem like it's blaming the victim for our own suffering, but on the other hand, it could be read as a kind of empowerment, because it's saying that if it's our fault that the punishment came, then we can change our behavior and perhaps avert future sufferings. So we'll hold that on pause, and I want to bring us into the continuation of the story. And if you weren't here last week, I think you should be pretty much caught up to speed here. The last thing that happened at the end of last week was that Caesar sent once the informer told Caesar, the ruler of the empire, that the Jews were revolting, Caesar sent Nero, one of his main generals, to go and destroy the Jews and destroy Jerusalem. But Nero had this incredible epiphany and realized that actually he was a servant of God, and he converted to Judaism and became the ancestor of Rabbi Meir. So now this is where our story picks up this week. So now the emperor goes to send another one of his generals, Vespasian Caesar, against the Jews. And Vespasian Caesar has no such revelation. Instead, he comes and he lays siege upon Jerusalem for several years. The entire city of Jerusalem is surrounded, and for 3 years, nothing can get in and nothing can get out. And that's where our story picks up today. So there were, at the time, in text number 2 in Jerusalem, there were 3 wealthy people. They were named Nakdimon ben Gurion, Ben Kalba Savua, and Ben Tzitzit HaKesat. We're going to talk about all 3 of these people. The Talmud goes on to tell us that there's significance to each of their 3 names. Nakdimon ben Gurion was called this because the sun shined on his behalf, nakad, on his behalf. Just think for a moment of what it means that there's a person who's so wealthy that it actually seems like the sun shines on his behalf. Like, this is a person for whom the world seems to flow, including the natural world, on his behalf. Ben Kalba Savua was called this because anyone who entered his house when he was hungry as a dog, Kelev, would leave satiated, Savea. So that's an interesting one. And then Ben Tzitzit HaKesat was referred to this because his tzitzit, his ritual fringes, would never touch the ground when he would walk around outside, but instead they would drag along blankets, meaning there's several stories of this throughout the rabbinic literature, that there are a few people who have such great wealth that when they would leave their homes, servants would literally walk in front of them and lay blankets before them so that they would not have to touch the ground. So his feet nor his tzitzit scraped against the ground. So these were 3 extremely wealthy people. They also say, by the way, some say that it could be that his name comes because he sat among the nobles of Rome. Even still, in this story, for whatever connections he has to Rome, he is among those who are being besieged by the Roman forces and who are now in a state of emergency because for 3 years, no food or water has been able to enter into this place. So one of these wealthy people says to the residents of Jerusalem, I will feed the entire population of Jerusalem because I have storehouses of wheat and barley. And the other one of these wealthy people says, I will give everybody here wine, salt, and oil. And one of them says, and I will provide the wood. So these 3 wealthy people, between the 3 of them, had enough to sustain the besieged city for 21 years. They're saying we can outlast this siege because we have enough supplies here that we can actually take care of ourselves. And I'm so struck by this when I was preparing this text. The wealth disparity, even back then, that there were 3 people, I mean, this is like the 0.1%, that there were 3 people who between them, when everyone else is starving, have enough that they themselves can provide. And also struck by the fact that in this case, those wealthy people, rather than building the bunkers under the ground that the billionaires are building and trying to figure out how to live eternally, say, I'm going to contribute this to the collective so that we can all survive. There is an incredible model of tzedakah here, of philanthropy and of communal responsibility. And here we see the ways in which tzedakah itself and the generosity of people who have wealth can actually be life-sustaining. And for all time, 2,000 years later, the names of these 3 people are associated with this act of generosity, which I think is pretty remarkable for us to just pause and consider. I'm going to take us through a little bit more of the text, and then we'll stop and we'll talk, and then we'll keep going. We have a lot that I want to share with you today. Okay, so these 3 people say we basically we can contribute enough that the community can be safe. We can outlive or outlast the Romans, or maybe they will just give up at some point. They'll get distracted. There are lots of other places they might want to conquer in the world. So we can sustain everybody, except v'havu bahu hanhu biryone. But there were these biryonim. There were these zealots who lived among the people in Jerusalem. These were Jewish extremists. And the sages said to the zealots, let's go out and make peace with the Romans. Let's cut a deal so that we can end the siege and end this war. But the zealots, the biryonim, would not allow the leadership of the people of Jerusalem to cut that deal. Instead, the zealots said to the sages, ostensibly the leaders of the community, but we're going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. Instead, let us go out and engage in battle against the Romans. They want to fight to the death. But the sages said to them, you are not going to win. You can't beat the forces of the Roman Empire. And so what did the zealots do? They arose and burned down the storehouses of wheat and barley and wine and salt and oil and wood. Everything that those three wealthy people had just amassed and donated in order to sustain the people, they went and they burned it all down. And now I can see that we've lost some lines here. Okay, I think we have at the top of the page the next line. Okay, and this caused a famine. Jerusalem was besieged for 3 years, but there wasn't a famine at first because the people had enough to eat. Then when the conditions got bad and people got hungry, the wealthiest people among them contributed their resources in order to protect the community. There was a famine the moment that the zealots, the biryonim, our Jewish extremists, decided to destroy the food supply in order to bring on such a state of desperation that the people who lived in that place would have no choice but to fight. Bless you. Thank you. I can't even track what's on this page. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So now I'm looking at text number 5. I shared this in a sermon several months after October 7th, and so maybe some of this will ring a bell. I'm just struck by the way that Rashi translates biryonim. Biryonim appear throughout the Talmud, by the way. They call them ruffians sometimes, or thugs, or zealots. It's not hard for us to imagine what these people look like and how they act, because in our time, we also have biryonim who are deeply invested in setting the world on fire in order to advance their extremist political ends. And Rashi describes them as anashim rekim ufuchzim lemilchama, people who are empty and eager for war. So the rabbis come to them saying, let's work for peace. And they say, no, not only will we not make a peace agreement, but we're going to make sure that the people suffer enough that they will not go out and make peace with Rome. And we're going to see even further, they actually stand at the gates and they don't let anyone leave Jerusalem if anyone wants to try to escape. Okay, so I want to say one more word about the dynamic here between the rabbanim, the sages, and the biryonim, these zealots, because I said earlier that the biryonim rose up against the people who are ostensibly the leaders of that place. But I want to plant the seed of question for us if the rabbis really are leaders here. Because we've seen throughout last week's text an incredible failure on the part of the rabbinic leadership. And I think we're seeing that here too. So why is it that when Jerusalem is besieged for 3 years, we don't hear a word from the rabbis? They don't speak out against the siege. They don't speak out to offer the people comfort. None of that's recorded in our story. The people we hear from are the wealthy Jews, the donors who stand up and offer their out of their own generosity to help keep the people alive. And then we hear of the biryonim, and then the rabbis respond saying, we got to do something, right? And I wonder what that is saying about the power vacuum that is created when the people who are called to be leaders fail to step into leadership, either political or moral or spiritual leadership, and how that moral vacuum is filled by extremists. Again, the reason that we're learning these texts now is for the love of learning, and because these texts are an incredible balm for us in a time of great heartache and anguish, and because they have eternal moral messages that we need to be paying attention to. There's a wisdom here for us. Where were they in the first 3 years? Where were they as the biryonim started to develop their own strength of voice? Why did we get, and how did we get to a place where those extremists actually have the power to go into the storehouses and burn down the place, to have even a voice at the table? Who brought those voices to the table? Who brings the margins to the mainstream when the margins are people who are calling for violent extremism, when the margins are empty people who are eager for war? And what kind of a failure of leadership is that? So now one of the ways to read this, by the way, and here I'm going to bring Jeffrey Rubenstein again, is he says it was years of inaction, years of rabbinic inaction that created the leadership vacuum for this new group of thugs, the biryonim, to consolidate power. The rabbis again and again choose not to take any decisive action, even here, not to stop these biryonim, these thugs, nor to go against their wishes and say, I understand that you want to burn the place down, but we will not burn this place down. And so Rubenstein says, in many ways, the thugs the biryonim are the opposite of anvitanut, the word that, remember, Rabbi Zachariah was accused of before. It's like kind of excessive humility, which is also a kind of excessive caution when the world needs decisive leadership to save the people. That leadership is gone. And I just think this is, I don't know if you get excited about this stuff, but Rubenstein points out that if you rearrange the order of the letters of Rabbanim, you will see the word biryonim, that in some ways they are the mirror image of one another, that the failure of one leadership creates the space for another leadership to emerge. Just think of what that means in our current political context, and spiritual context, and think about who the voices have been over the course of the past several years that have given voice to the great pain and the anguish and the need for another path, for a third way, for a path to peace. Do you hear those voices primarily coming from the rabbis of our community in Israel, or do you hear them coming from secular Jews on the street when they are coming from our Jewish community, and from artists, from authors, from musicians, right? Where is the leadership that is using its voice to declare that there must be another way here? And what is the pain point in the absence of that voice being used in that way? Okay, I'm going to pause for a second to see if you have any thoughts or comments before we go on with the story. Rabbi Dr. Candace Levy. I'm so glad that you're here, and I want to say that Candace has been my part-time chavruta as I prepare for this, and it's just such a joy to learn text with you deeply.
I mean, an honor. So it's very interesting, right? Like this point that you were making about like the power vacuum and the rabbis like really calling on themselves and saying like, we failed, right? This is our moral failure of like not acting. And I think it's a beautiful thing, like, especially if you consider it from a historical perspective, that the rabbis had no power during the Second Temple period. So when they look back, they could have given themselves a pass, right?
Mm-hmm,
they could have said, well, right, if we had been in charge, none of this would have happened, right? We would have interfered. And instead, what they chose to do was tell the story of the destruction of the temple as a story of like the moral failure of inaction. And they put themselves in the hot seat. Like, yeah.
That's great. Okay, I really appreciate that, and I want to say I think they're doing two things. I think that it's important to note that the people who are telling the story are the rabbis. So the people who are holding the rabbis responsible are the people. It's the same. It's not the same rabbis, but it's the same class of people. And they so as Rabbi Levy says, or Dr. Levy, what do we, Candace? As you say, they could be telling this story about their own line of tradition, saying, look how we failed there, we must not fail again. There's another hint of possibility that's going to come up in a few moments when we read what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai does that I think I'm going to circle back to your point because I think they might be trying to say something else in addition to that. Rabbi Panitz.
I think there's an added layer of complexity here, which is very resonant learning this text on Hanukkah, which is to think about, I think it's sort of easy to condemn zealotry and to come down hard on Jewish zealotry. And perhaps to some degree, these Jewish zealots think of themselves as the continuation of the Jewish zealotry of 2 centuries prior to them, the Maccabean revolt. And maybe the Maccabees, right, to some degree, looked at centralized Jewish leadership, felt like that Jewish leadership was compromising on their religious integrity by Hellenizing or making too many concessions to the Greco-Syrian Empire. And we celebrate the Maccabees, right? Even the rabbis celebrate, well, maybe that's a more complicated point, but meaning,
yeah,
maybe you can understand the impulse for zealotry in this moment based on the historical precedent of the Maccabees and the feeling that the zealots need to take matters into their own hands because centralized mainstream Jewish leadership isn't doing what they think they ought to be.
Yeah, so thank you for that. This is the second point that I'm going to circle back to, but thank you for bringing in Hanukkah right now. One of the reasons that they could be casting such a harsh light on their lineage, on the rabbinic lineage, is because they want to say we failed before, let's get it right this time. Like, we sit down after every event that we do at IKAR and we say, like, what did we do right and what needs work for next time? Even the best events, there's always things that we can do better. And here they're looking and they're saying, we're trying to build a sustainable tradition here. We can't behave like that or the same kind of destruction will come to us again. But there's also a deeper critique going on here, I think, about the type of rabbis who were in power at the time of around 70 CE, at the time of the destruction. And what we're going to see in a couple of moments is the birth of something that is created as a counter testimony, not only to the zealotry, but also to the excessive meekness, cautiousness, passivity of that vision of what a rabbi is. And so we'll come back to both of these comments. Thank you. Okay, we got to talk about Marta. And I want to tell you that Marta, the text number 6, as we go on, we're on Gittin 56a for those who are following along at home. And hello, thank you for joining us. So Marta, apparently Marta is the Aramaic version of Miriam, and I was thinking of just calling her Miriam because I don't want to cast aspersions on our Marta, who is, but actually I think there's a tikkun here because we have a beloved Marta in our community, but we're going to use the name that the Talmud gives her, and I believe that she will, we'll have a slight tikkun at the end of this, but this is not the greatest of stories here. Okay, so Marta ben Baitos. She was one of the wealthy women of Jerusalem. We've already heard about the wealthy men of Jerusalem. But when the men go out into the city and say, here, we'll give all of our everything in order to sustain the community, this Marta bat Baitos does not do that. Instead, she sends her servant out and says to her servant, go bring me fine flour from the market. Again, the servant here is mimicking the servant who's sent by the host to go get bar kamsa and who makes this terrible, life-changing, history-shaping mistake by bringing kamsa instead. The servant goes out, but by the time he gets there, they're completely sold out of the fine flour, the King Arthur, the stuff, it's gone. And so he basically comes back to her and he says, there's no more fine flour. There is regular flour, but I know you, Marta bat Baitos, and I know you don't like the regular flour, so I didn't buy it. What should I do? And Marta bat Baitos says to him, okay, so go bring me the regular flour. She's feeling the pinch already of the 3 years of famine. But by the time he went, the ordinary flour is also gone. And so he comes back to her and he says, there's no more ordinary flour, but there is coarse flour, which I know you would never want in this house. What should I do? And she says to him, so go bring me the coarse flour. By the time he went, the coarse flour was, of course, already sold. So he came back to her and he said, there's no coarse flour, there is barley flour. And she says, so go bring me the barley flour for God's sake. But by the time he went, the barley flour is sold out. I just want to, just for a moment, and it is farcical and I think it's meant to be funny. But something's going on here, right? In which this servant is scared of her. He's trained to be the embodiment of that passivity, that meekness, that I can't act without explicit permission. But what if we sacrifice the animal with the blemish in its eye? Then what if somebody hears and they might think, and I think this servant is meant to hearken back not only to the servant who invited Bar Kamsa, but actually to be in some ways the embodiment of this failed leadership. What does it mean when we're so scared that we have to keep asking for permission to even take a breath? And we talked last week about how absolutely treacherous leadership is. Whatever you say, you're going to upset people and you're going to hurt people. But what happens when you don't say anything? And what happens when you're so scared that you just mute yourself like this poor servant does because he's scared and he doesn't want to, by the way, he doesn't want to upset the person who pays his bills, which for the rabbis is, the donor who's going to pull away their donation because you said or didn't say the word that they wanted or didn't want to hear. And the servant becomes the embodiment of that kind of fearful, passive leadership. I don't even know if we call it leadership, representation, right? The people who should be leading but fail to lead. Rabbi Len.
I see the servant here as passive aggressive.
Okay.
I don't think he's a weak person. He's tired of being pushed around. He doesn't like what she's doing. She's the wealthy one. She probably has her own store of flour. Maybe she shouldn't even be getting the flour.
That's great. Okay, I will let that reading stand. That's excellent. But I think they both work. Okay, let's read it both ways. This could be the servant actually fighting back. I like it, but very, very. It's. Oh, Rabbi Len said maybe this is the servant who's fed up because he's been working for this impossible person and he's showing her how her particularity is obscene, especially in the face of a widespread famine where people are hungry. And she's like, I shall, send my servant for the fine flour in the market. There's nothing left. People are dying in the street. So look what happens to, and by the way, I'm just gonna, Candace pointed out to me a couple weeks ago, when we were talking about preparation for Kamsa Bar Kamsa, that the word Kamsa appears nowhere else in the Talmud, and that in Aramaic, the word Kamsa means locust. Did you know that? Did you all know that? I did not know this until Candace and Jeffrey Rubenstein told me. And so the word means locust, and the locust comes as a hint of a looming crisis. And so the way that the locust comes in is it comes to warn the people of there's a kind of destruction that's coming. They come out of nowhere and they leave only agony and starvation in their wake. And when one locust appears, more always follow. So those are the things we need to know about locusts. And so here, what we see, there's no more flour in the markets. What started with Kamsa and Bar Kamsa has now kind of taken full effect. It wasn't just one small insult. It's like one locust that comes in and now there's a swarm of locusts that have all the food's gone. There's nothing left. So Marta Baitos she just took her shoes off and now she's got no flour. And so she's got to figure out what to do. So because of her servant is so incompetent, he can't bring her anything. But unfortunately for her, she just took her shoes off. So what's she going to do? She's going to have to go out barefoot. And so she says, I'm going to go out and I'm going to find something to eat myself. Again, like to Rabbi Len's point, undermining the servant's ability to do his own job. But she says, I'm going to go out and find something to eat. And she goes out and she steps on a pile of dung. It sticks to her foot. She's overcome by disgust umita, and she dies. The dramatic elements here are fantastic. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who we're now introduced to, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says about her a line from Deuteronomy chapter 28, which seems now to have been a prophecy or a prediction. And that line says that a tender and delicate woman from among our people who would not adventure to set the sole of her foot upon the ground, that woman who's being described in Deuteronomy 28 must be Marta bat Baitos, which means that the prophecy of destruction that appears in Deuteronomy 28:56, that when this delicate woman ventures out to, who would never put her foot on the ground, also, by the way, because she, like the tzitzit guy, always has, when she goes out, people put carpets before her. Now she's going out barefoot. Not only is she touching the ground, she's stepping in a pile of dung. And this signals to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that this prophecy is being fulfilled in our time. This prophecy of devastation and destruction is here. And so this is a moment of revelation for Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, because he's seen a lot of pain and anguish. He's seen the people suffer, but all of the sudden he sees from this verse the prediction that now, in fact, this will be the destruction, the downfall of Jerusalem. I cut out a small passage here about Rabbi Tzadok, which because there's just too much, and we weren't going to be able to fully get through it. But there's an incredible story about one of the rabbis who contrasted with the other rabbis of this story, who are really passive and afraid to see the truth until it's too late. Like, imagine seeing 3 years into a siege and well into a famine that, like, it's over. In contrast, Rabbi Tzadok 40 years ago saw this coming. And Rabbi Tzadok was trying to take action 40 years ago. But we're gonna margin. We'll put that in the margins now, and maybe in the spring we'll do a Rabbi Tzadok a day of just learning and honoring the other, as I call him, the other Rabbi Tzadok. So okay, so I'm gonna close this for in one moment with one small piece. Marta bat Baitos is dying, and in her final breath, she takes all of her gold and all of her silver and she throws it into the marketplace, and she says, "What do I even need this for?" And she quotes a verse from Ezekiel that was also prophesying that there would come a day when neither gold nor silver could be of any value, of any use. All the money in the world cannot save her and cannot save us. And this should awaken in your memory something from last week, in which all of the money of the world was not enough. Is it ringing any bells? So Bar Kamsa says, just let me stay and I will pay for everything I eat and drink. That's not enough. I'll pay for half the feast. That's not enough. I'll pay for the entire feast. It's not enough. You have to go. And Bar Kamsa saw the limitations of his money to buy his dignity. He couldn't avert shame. And here too, Marta bat Baitos also realizes all the money in the world cannot save us. And there is a certain point in the decline of a civilization where you realize that all of the power that you thought you had is now worthless. We're all going in the same direction now. And that's quite devastating here. Okay, I'm going to pause for a moment. The story's not over. So do we have any thoughts or quick comments about this? Rabbi Zach, look how many rabbis we have today. That's great.
So my thought is the wealthy woman took off her shoes and walked into the street to somehow be within the general public.
Wow.
With a really good grasp of what that is like. So she's not always doing the thing that it presents, picky about everything about the flower and making everybody nervous, but she's actually wanting to understand the humans that are out they're struggling.
This is such a great read. And I'm just going to honor Rabbi Zaki. This is a beautiful book by Gila Fine called The Mad Woman in the Rabbi's Attic. And she does a rereading of the women of the Talmud. And I was up until 2 a.m. reading her take on Marta, which is exquisite and actually aligns with Rabbi Zaki's read of this story, which is, remember I said that there would be a little bit of a tikkun for Marta bat Baitos. So what Gila Fine writes in her scholarship is that that actually there is a moment of transformation, and we don't see a lot of characters who change in this set of stories. People are who they are, and in fact, their stubbornness, their grasp on their passivity or their zealotry and their inability to shift is part of the problem with this story. And here, Marta bat Baitos, who's never left the house without carpets being blankets before her, she goes out barefoot. And in a way, this Gila Fine and Rabbi Zaki read as perhaps an indication that there's a certain moment at which she says, like, not full of disdain for her servant, you failed, I'm going to go do it myself. But, you know, if there's this much suffering here, I've been in my penthouse, you know, let me go check out what's actually going, where are the people, where is the pain? And Gila Fine will argue that that moment of epiphany or transformation that Marta bat Baitos goes through actually is what awakens Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's epiphany or transformation, which we're now going to read about. So thank you so much for saying that. I want to say that I did not see it that way. Yeah, but I love that you saw that. I love that you saw that in this story, and I want to hold the possibility that this character has a redemptive arc, even though she ends up dying in the street covered with, you know, dung, as we say. Yes, Sarah.
I'm going to take the shot I wrote again.
Okay.
Which is that I'm thinking.
Will you grab the mic right there for Malik?
I'm sorry. Taking the Shammai Road, I'm thinking that why did she go out in the street without shoes? Her servant that used to put her shoes on her no longer was alive or no longer worked for her. So she perhaps didn't know how to put her own shoes on.
That's great. You might be right about this. And there's another piece that I cut out of the text about shoes that we'll hint to in just a moment. But there's a running thread here that I think is important. Like, it could be that this is a person who literally does not know how to put on her own shoes. That is absolutely possible. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to keep going. Abba Sikara. So we're in number 9 now. This is Gittin 56a. We are at number 9. So Abba Sikara was the leader of these biryonim, of the, what are we calling it? Zealots of Jerusalem. And he also happened to be the son of the sister of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, because families are complicated. Right? Like, families are complicated. Here's the rabbi, the great Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and his sister's son is the leader of the group that filled the moral void left in the wake of the failure of the Rabbanut. So they're nephew and uncle. And Rabbi Yochanan, and because of that family connection, by the way, I don't think I know any family that doesn't have something like this going on. I mean, this is an extreme version of it, but like, everybody's got something where that table's complex because the uncle is sitting at the table, and so is the niece or the nephew. Okay. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai sends a message to him, because when you're in a family, even though you detest the other person's views, you still are in a family with them. And in this case, he used his family connections. And he called Abba Sikara and ushered him into a secret meeting with him. And Abba Sikara comes. By the way, the names, you see how all the names are super relevant here. And Abba Sikara means father of the assassin or father of the murderer. Like, it's this is like a guy who, you know, they're trying, the text is certainly lending itself toward an interpretation of what these extremists are. So he comes, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says to him, what are you doing? You're going to kill everyone through starvation. The place is besieged by Romans. But you, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, says to the Jewish leader of the Zealots, you're the one who's starving us to death. Not the same way that the rabbis generations later are saying it's not the fault of the Roman forces, it's our fault for senseless hatred and moral failure. In the moment, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is saying not, it's the Romans' fault, it's your fault. Because you created the conditions for famine within this siege. We could have survived the siege. Just think of the level of self-criticism that is being permitted in this text. This is really astonishing. You're going to kill us all through starvation. And listen to what Abba Sikara says. What can I do? If I object, the zealots will kill me. The leader of the zealots is helpless to raise a moral objection to the behavior of the zealots. Because once you ignite that fire of zealotry, nobody can quell that fire, right? The leader of the zealots himself cannot quell that fire. And so he says, if I object to the fact that they're starving out our Jewish population, they will murder me. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says to him, you have to do something. Show me a way that I can get out of here. Show me that it's possible, because at least then there will be some small salvation. Efshar dehave hatzala purta. There'll be something that can be saved from this disaster that you have created for our people. And so Abba Sikara hatches a plan. And in this plan, he tells Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, I'm in text 10 now. So here's what you have to do. Pretend that you are deathly ill, and that have all of your students come and inquire about you. Have them come and ask about your welfare, and then bring like meat that's gone bad or fruit that's gone bad, something putrid, and place it under your bed so that people will come in the room and they'll smell that putrid smell, and they will assume that the great Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai has died. At that moment, tell your students to come into the room and don't let anyone else in so that the zealots don't see what's unfolding. And then they are going to essentially transport your body out of your home in a coffin. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai does exactly what Abba Sikara says. I just want you to think of the agency involved in Abba Sikara's leadership here. He can't stand up to his own people, but he's not inactive, because the fire of zealotry teaches a person, like, you have agency. No matter how bad it seems, there's something you can do. And here, from that zealotry, he actually uses it for good. He comes up with a plan that's going to address Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's needs. Can I keep going? Okay. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the great sage, the brilliant Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, asks the zealot to come up with a plan and then follows it to the letter. And he has Rabbi Eliezer come to one side and Rabbi Yoshua come to the other side of his coffin or bed or stretcher or whatever he's on. And they take his body out of his home as if he's a dead man. And when they get to the perimeter of the city of Jerusalem, there are guards there. And I hinted at this earlier. Who are the guards? They're not Romans. There are Jewish extremists, Biryonim, who are stationed at the entrance and exit of that city to stop people from fleeing the city that is under siege. The people in the city are suffering from a famine of the making of the Roman forces besieging the city and of the extremists within, who burned down the resources so that the people would suffer, hoping that that would make them fight back. And because they do not want peace, they are empty people who yearn for war. And when people want to leave, because all they want to do is live, they have stationed guards to stop anyone from getting out alive. Like, this is a 2,000-year-old text. And so the guards stop Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Eliezer, who are holding the body of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and they say, he's dead. We're just bringing him out for burial. So they say, let's see if he's dead. We want to pierce the body with a sword. And they're like, no, you can't. Abba Sikara says, no, you can't do that because the Romans will see it. And hear the echo of Rabbi Zechariah here. Well, what if you do that? Then the Romans will see and they'll think, oh, they stabbed their own teachers. So you can't stab him. Just let them go out and bury him. And they say, well, let us push him to see if he's alive. Because if we shove him and he's alive, he'll make a sound or he'll make a movement. And they say, no, because then the Romans who can see us will say, look at how they push their teachers. And so the zealots finally say, fine, you can leave. You can leave for burial. Okay. I'm going to keep going.
Yep.
Okay. So in this way, the Biryonim have fully embodied being the gatekeepers of our people. The extremists are the power brokers, and they are the guardians of our community and the ones who are keeping our community from safety, from reason, from morality. The extremists are at the heart of the story. But here, only because Abba Sikara and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai work together are they able to outsmart these Biryonim. They can't beat them, but they could temporarily outsmart them and at least get Rabbi Yoshua ben Zakkai out. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai out the door. Okay. So I'm sorry to do this so fast. I wish we had more time, but I can't leave you in suspense for like the next 4 weeks until we come back. Okay. So text 12. So when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai gets out, he goes right to the Roman camp. The rabbi who's been besieged, he goes right to the Roman camp and he goes up to Vespasian Caesar, the guy who's responsible for besieging Jerusalem. And he says to him, greetings to you, king. Shlama alach malka. Greetings to you, my king. And Vespasian Caesar says to him, now you're liable for 2 death penalties. 1, because I'm not a king and you're calling me a king. And 2, because if I am a king, why didn't you tell me sooner? Okay. Again, like I mean, Candace, tell us later if you agree or disagree. I think this is intended to be humorous also. To see the kind of the humanity and the egos of these people. So but that line of why didn't you come to me until now should haunt us. Because why didn't he go to him until now? Why did he wait until 3 years? Why did the rabbi, the leader of the school of rabbis inside Jerusalem, why did he wait for 3 years of siege? For the donors to step up and give all their stuff, for the zealots to rise up, to grow in power, to burn down the storehouses, famine in the streets, and then he goes to Vespasian Caesar? Where the hell was he? And Vespasian Caesar asks him, why did you wait until now to come and try to talk to me? Like, what if the 2 of us could have put our heads together before? Again, think of Nero. In the voice of the other, the enemy, we are hearing the wisdom that our people needs to hear. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai answers him saying, when you say you're not king, actually you already are a king. And he gives him this prophecy from Isaiah that essentially says, and it's a bit complicated, but essentially it says, Jerusalem's going to fall at the hands of a king. And that tells me that you, sir, are a king, because we can all see what direction this is going in. Jerusalem's about to fall and you are about to be a king. If you look at the end of text 12, again, he says, if I am a king, why didn't you come to me sooner? Like, I'm haunted by that question. What could have been had Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai gone to try to negotiate or make a deal sooner? And the answer is because there's zealots who wouldn't let me. Well, guess what? He got out eventually when the zealots had more power. So what could he have done? And what excuses do we make for why we're not able to take the leadership that we should be taking in the moment that we should be taking it? Okay, now this is, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do justice to this, but essentially Vespasian Caesar poses a dilemma to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And the dilemma is this. I'm going to pull away from the text just to give us the kind of quicker order of this for a moment. If there's a barrel of honey and there's a snake that's wrapped around it, wouldn't they have to break the barrel in order to kill the snake? Okay. So if the city of Jerusalem is a barrel of honey, land of milk and honey, the barrel of honey, and there's a snake wrapped around it, and what's the snake? The Biryonim, it's the zealots. Vespasian Caesar is saying now, it's not us, the ones who are literally wrapped around your city besieging it. You know that the people responsible for your pain, the snake around this city, are the zealots. What do I do to say, to get rid of the snake? And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai doesn't have an answer for him. He is silent, like Jacob is silent when he hears about the rape of Dinah, right? He's silent. And so Rav Yosef later, and maybe it was Rabbi Akiva, says, basically, he's a fool. Because Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, because what he should have said, what he could have said is, you take out a pair of tongs and you remove the snake. Meaning you go in, like targeted assassination, right? Like he's the guy at the war room saying there's another way here, arrest warrants, like something, I don't know, but you don't destroy the entire city because they're bad guys that live inside it. You just don't, you can't, it's immoral, it's wrong. But he doesn't say that. He is silent, which leaves Vespasian Caesar with the conclusion that the way to respond to a snake that has encircled a jar of honey is to destroy the whole thing, right? Take it down to the ground. Right as this happens, in the face of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's silence, a messenger arrives from Rome and says, arise, Vespasian Caesar, the emperor has died, and you, sir, are the new Caesar. So in fact, he is the king that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai has told him that he is. And again, Vespasian Caesar turns to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who's lucky to be there to witness this incredible moment. And he says to him, if you're so smart, why did you not come to me sooner? The third time we hear the repetition of that fateful question. Why did you not come to me sooner? And then, and Jeff, I see that you have a question. I'm gonna bring us very quickly through this, and then we'll have a couple minutes for questions. Forgive me again. I hate to push through, and I'm so curious what you're all thinking about all this. Okay, so Vespasian Caesar then basically turns to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and says to him, "I got to go to Rome because I'm becoming Caesar now, but ask me for any wish, you who prophesied me becoming a king. I'll give you anything in the world." And look in text 15. What does Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says? He doesn't ask for one wish. He asks for three. And I think some of this might be familiar to you. He says, give me Yavne and its sages, ten li Yavne v'chachmeha. Give me Yavne and its sages. Give me the tiny little town of Yavne and the rabbis who live and teach in that place, and let me have my little Beit Midrash and live in peace. Then he asks for two more things. Let the dynasty of Rabbi Gamliel, who is the dynasty of the Nisi'im, this is the aristocracy of Jerusalem, let them stay alive. And give me Rabbi Tzadok, this rabbi whose story we skipped, but we'll talk about at some point in the spring. But critically, what does he not ask for here? He does not ask for Jerusalem to be spared. The Romans have besieged the place, 3 years of famine, everything's burned down, the people are dying from stepping in dung, and what does he ask for? Just give me a little Beit Midrash somewhere not so far from here. He does not ask to save Jerusalem. And again, Rav Yosef, or maybe it was Rabbi Akiva, repeats that this man was a fool, because he should have said, just leave us alone. Vespasian Caesar, go to Rome, get all the riches of the Roman Empire, just leave the Jews alone and let us sort out our stuff. You don't need to destroy Jerusalem. You don't need to destroy the temple. And the story goes on to say, why didn't he do that? And I mean, this is the question I want to ask us to consider. Why didn't he? Given that literally the Caesar himself says, I will give you anything you ask. I will grant you any wish. Why didn't he say, do not burn our holiest place to the ground. You know, in the other versions of the story, IKAR elsewhere, they say he put like these catapults and he put the heads of pigs and they were launched into the temple, into our most sacred places, rape, murder, abduction. They took people as enslaved in chains into Rome. Why didn't he stop that? Over 1 million people were murdered. Why didn't Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai say, don't do it? Don't do it. Like, we can negotiate. I'll work with the zealots. We'll try to quiet the flames. Like, just go to Rome. But he doesn't. And the rabbis are as troubled by it as I think we are. And their answer that they give in the Gemara is, he probably thought that if he asks for too much, Vespasian Caesar wouldn't give him anything. And therefore he'd lose Yavna too. He'd lose it all. So he didn't want to be too chutzpahdik. So he just asked for something small because he thought he could get it, and he did get it. But I am unsatisfied because our tradition teaches us that transformation is possible and that people can change, and that even biryonim can change if given the opportunity to. And so, I mean, I put this verse from chapter 3 of Yonah, but even the people of Nineveh changed. Our tradition is fighting with itself here. Like, how do we know that this decree could not have been averted? Great decrees against our people have been averted. And so, and against people generally. And so I'm going to very quickly just show you something that I think is super interesting. And you can take this home and read from IKAR on your own. But there's several different versions of this story that appear. And in the IKAR version, it's not Abba Sikara who's the brilliant one who catches the plan. It's actually Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai himself, who's the brilliant one who hatches the plan. And here, if you just look at the top of page 6, they ask, Vespasian Caesar asks Rabbi Yochanan, what should I do when there's a barrel and a snake is there? And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, you bring a snake charmer and you have the snake charmer charm the snake away and leave the barrel intact. But this guy called Pangar, this guy says, no, you kill the snake and the barrel, burn it all down, Ben Gavir, burn it all down, right? There's no innocence. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, in this version of the story, he's not voiceless. The IKAR version of the story imagines a rabbinic leadership that actually has a voice and says, there are lots of ways to get a snake off of a barrel. You charm them away, right? And then it says, what should one do to a cabinet in which a snake has nested? What if he's buried deep inside, barreled his way deep inside? And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, you bring a charmer. Again, you charm the snake. You get him out of there. You leave the cabinet intact. But Pangar says, you kill the snake and you burn the cabinet, right? Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is like, are you kidding, Pangar, whoever this Pangar is? Are you kidding me? He says, like, you're going to burn it all down? You're going to destroy all the innocent people who live in that place? How dare you? And he says, I only want what's best for you as long as the temple stands. This is Pangar, some Roman general, saying this to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. As long as the temple is intact, the kingdoms will confront you. But if that temple is destroyed, the kingdoms will not confront you. If you are a Jew who has sovereignty in Jerusalem, the enemies will forever come to destroy you. But if we destroy the temple and you flee Jerusalem, and some of you survive and you live in the diaspora, you'll be able to thrive in the diaspora and people will leave you alone. Because what reason will anyone have to want to destroy you if you're no longer in Jerusalem? Just hear how this argument lands for us. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is like, I don't buy that at all. And look what happens now when then Vespasian Caesar comes to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and says, make any request and I will grant it. And his request is, leave this city and go on your way. The version of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that I desperately want and need, the brave, not passive, active agent, not extreme version. You see all the tensions. Like, we want him to be not passive, but not so active that he's a zealot. We want him to be a leader, but a moral leader, not an immoral leader. But here he's everything that we wanted. He says, leave the city, Vespasian Caesar, go on your way. And he says, did the citizens of Rome crown me so that I would leave Jerusalem intact? Make another request and I'll grant it. And listen to what he says, and this just breaks my heart. Just leave one gate open so that the people can get out alive. Leave one gate open. So if you have to destroy Jerusalem, at least the people will live. This, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, the most important, the most precious, the greatest dignity in the world is the human beings who live in a place, not the place itself. If we have to lose Jerusalem, at least save the people. And I want to close by saying this. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is so not off the hook, right? I mean, he goes out and he builds rabbinic Judaism in Yavne with his students. And as Rabbi Panitz and Rabbi Levy hinted before, there's a problem with the rabbinate that existed pre-destruction. This is a passive rabbinate. This is a rabbinate that is amoral. It does not engage even when the moment demands it. And yet I believe that it's not just Pangar who understands on some level or believes on some level that story needs to end for a new story to be born. But also Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai understands it. And it's part of the reason that he didn't ask Vespasian Caesar to save Jerusalem. Because there was a moment where he realized it was too far gone and we have to build something new. We're not going to try to reform the broken system. We have to start again. And he does do that. And the Judaism that we live now and the texts that we study and the rituals that we practice are outgrowths of that Judaism that's born in Yavne, that started before Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. There were already students and rabbis living and teaching there quietly. Maybe they left Jerusalem already because they didn't think that they could breathe in that place. And even still, he failed to try to save Jerusalem. He failed to try to save his own people. And I believe we are left to feel that tension, to live in that tension. And in Brakhot, it tells the story of the deathbed ritual of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. But when he grows ill, his students come in to be with him and he's crying. He does not feel settled about his life story. He, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that saved Judaism, really. He built a Judaism that was counter testimony to the Judaism of the temple. He built a Judaism that's rooted in love instead of in zealotry. And he's weeping on his deathbed, I believe, because he understands that he ultimately failed. And maybe the greatest hint to his failure is the question Vespasian Caesar asked him 3 times, which he never answered, which is, what took you so long? What if you had shown up sooner? What could have gone differently in this story? I went over time and I promised you I wasn't going to do that. But I really, I thank you for learning. And I hope that outside of our class time, I'm going to be able to hear all of your thoughts about our learning today. I'm really so grateful to all of you for the chance to look at these incredibly rich texts together. So I'm going to close with Kaddish de Rabbanan, and then if people want to stick around, we can certainly continue to talk, but I want to let you go to work if such is your way. Okay. Is anybody here grieving the death of a loved one who wants to join in? Any names that you want to share? And we'll certainly hold the names of all of the beloveds, Rob and Michelle, and the names of all the people whose lives were taken this week.
My father,
Edgar Aftergood, thank you.
my grandfather,
Morris Auerbach, thank you. Mickey Bratman. Ruth Malin. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei Rabam, v'yamad divrach v'yirutei v'yamlith malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, v'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach le'olam omei omaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudsha brichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Al Yisrael v'al Rabbanan v'al Talmidehon v'al kol Talmidehon v'al kol man da'askin be'oraita diva atra hadain v'diva chol atar v'atar Yehei lahon u'lachon shlama rabba china v'chista v'rachamin v'chayin arichin v'mizonei revichei u'forkana min kadam avahon divishmaya v'imru amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Osei Shalom B'mromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Zichronam Livracha. Comfort and consolation to all who are grieving. We are going to pick this class up in the beginning of January. Rabbi Panitz will be teaching, and we're working out our calendar, but we'll let you know. And I fell in love with learning with all of you, so I'm going to be doing more teaching than I had originally planned. But we're still hashing it all out. So I hope to see you back here early and often.